Ever wonder how to blow up a toilet? Today, Kwan's gonna show you. Watch closely. He carefully pulls 2 bottles, a roll of wire, a pack of cigarettes, and a box of matches from his bag. Then, one by one, he wraps the wire around the necks of the bottles and secures them tightly. Next, he takes a cigarette, removes the filter, and sticks it into the matchbox. Then, he clamps the matchbox tightly to the wire around the bottlenecks. All he has to do is light the cigarette, and the homemade bomb will automatically detonate in about 10 seconds. And just like that, it's done. Before leaving, he calmly locks the toilet stall and heads to a safe distance outside and waits for the explosion. Sure enough, after the matchbox ignites, the methane gas inside the toilet immediately goes up in a massive blast. The unexpected explosion sends shockwaves through the entire building. But what's strange is that when the police investigate the bathroom, they can't find any trace of explosives, because Kwan's real revenge has only just begun. Turns out, just a week ago, he was walking with his daughter on the streets of England. They arrive at the mall, and Kwan gets ready to find a parking spot, so he lets his daughter out first. Without even taking one step out of the car, she encountered a terrorist attack. The strength of that explosion even blew Kwan away, even though he was a distance away. When Kwan regained consciousness, he was covered in injuries. He struggled to his feet, battling the pain, and frantically started searching for his daughter. But tragically, she was killed in the accident. And the people behind this bombing have no idea the devastating revenge this 60-year-old Chinese man is about to unleash on them. Because Kwan is no ordinary man. He's a former elite special forces soldier with a dark history. Back in his war days, his 2 older daughters were tragically killed in the line of fire, and he lost his wife when she died in childbirth while giving birth to his younger daughter. After settling in England, Kwan and his daughter opened a local restaurant. Hard work and dedication paid off. But then this sudden tragedy struck. When he gets home, Kwan stands frozen, staring at his daughter's unfinished homework, her unmade bed, the makeup she last used. He can still feel her presence on her clothes. He just can't believe that his daughter, who was so full of life that morning, is now gone forever. Soon after, the police arrive to ask for information, trying to find out who was responsible. But the police clearly don't know who the perpetrators are. Seeing Kwan's overwhelming grief, the police can only promise to severely punish the criminals and comfort him by saying that the thing he needs the most right now is his family. But Kwan responds with pain, "I no longer have a family." Desperate to find out who was behind the bombing, Kwan stays at the police station for 5 days straight. But after so many days, the case hasn't made any progress. The police chief is forced to come and meet with him. As soon as he sits down, Kwan pulls all of his savings out of his bag, begging the chief to give him the names of those responsible for the explosion. But the police chief refuses. He understands Kwan's grief, but how can he give an old man the names of violent terrorists, knowing he'll go looking for death? Besides, even the police haven't been able to identify the culprits. In the end, Kwan has no choice but to leave empty-handed. However, a month passes, and the bombing investigation slowly fades from public attention. With the law failing to deliver justice, Kwan knows he has to take revenge himself. He begins investigating day and night. Finally, he learns from a news report that the organization behind the bombing is called the IRA. And, feeling the pressure from public outrage, a government official is now in an interview with the media, trying to justify that he has no involvement in the bombing. This politician is named Liam. However, what's strange is that Liam was also a member of the IRA just 5 years ago. Although he has now left the organization with such a sensitive background, Kwan immediately focuses his attention on him. He believes Liam definitely has inside information. So, he quickly calls the government hotline for Liam, asking if he knows any inside information. As soon as Liam heard that, his face completely changed, but he insisted he didn't know anything, clearly trying to hide something. Then he slammed down the phone. Facing Liam's coldness and inaction, the fire of revenge in Kwan's heart burned even hotter. That night, he bought a bunch of supplies and modified his car. He knew this mission could be a matter of life and death, so he signed the restaurant over to his only friend, Kui. Kui, full of worry, pressed him for answers, but Kwan didn't explain anything. He just drove away. The next day, Kwan, carrying a bag, walked right into Liam's office building. This sent the security guards into a panic. They immediately checked his belongings. Luckily, inside were just some everyday items. Besides a folding knife, he had no other offensive weapons. The security guards were about to kick him out, But to maintain his image as a man of the people, Liam came out to greet him. Kwon hoped Liam would use his power to investigate the name of the killer. But Liam kept making excuses and promised to do his best to bring the culprit to justice, but still wouldn't give up a name. Kwon smiled slightly. He understood that if he didn't teach Liam a lesson, the politician wouldn't change his mind and help him. So, after saying goodbye to Liam, Kwon took the things he'd prepared and quietly went to the bathroom. At this point, Liam still had no idea what was about to happen. When Kwon calmly walked out, the entire bathroom exploded into pieces in the next second. The deafening explosion terrified everyone. All Kwon wanted was an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Soon after, investigators arrived at the scene. They determined that the explosion was just a warning, as the destructive power wasn't that great. Just as Liam was still trying to figure out who was responsible, Kwon called him. Seeing the call, Liam immediately understood everything. He cursed and yelled at Kwon, asking why he was doing such dangerous things. Kwon calmly asked if he had changed his mind. As soon as he said that, Liam flew into a rage. He, a high-ranking government official, was being pressured like this by a commoner. He not only refused Kwon's request, but also threatened to make Kwon pay for his actions today. Then, he ordered his subordinates to investigate Kwon's residence. On the other side, Kwon, with a tired expression, drove back to his hotel and started building a new bomb. First, he poured ice into a plastic container. Then, he carefully poured 2 bottles of nitroglycerin into the ice to cool them down. He carefully mixed them according to the correct ratio. After adjusting the temperature precisely, he slowly dripped the nitroglycerin in, and a bomb was successfully created. The next day, Liam's driver was getting ready to start the car when the security guards outside immediately noticed something was wrong. They discovered a thin wire on the gas tank cap. Terrified, they quickly yelled for the driver to stop. Then they cautiously approached the gas tank. As they tremblingly opened the gas cap, they discovered a piece of paper inside. On it were clearly written the 2 words, the name. The purpose of this was to threaten Liam into revealing the name of the culprit. Meanwhile, the bomb in the car wouldn't actually explode. Kwon intentionally left the wire exposed, precisely so the security guards would see it. However, Liam wasn't someone easily bullied. Very quickly, his subordinates found Kwon's location. The security guards immediately led a team to surround the hotel where Kwon was staying. Hearing the commotion, Kwon immediately realized something was wrong. He used a chair to block the door, planning to jump out the window to escape. Unfortunately, people were waiting outside. With no other choice, he had to crawl into the attic to escape through the roof. Unexpectedly, the men broke in at that moment. After a struggle, Kwon seized an opportunity. He slid down a pole to the 2nd floor. But the opponents were 1 step faster, blocking the door. Kwon quickly picked up a chair and attacked. After taking down 1 person, he went back to the door, facing 2 attackers coming from both sides. Kwon, relying on his flexible kung fu, successfully escaped. By the time the last man ran outside, there was no trace of Kwon on the streets. Knowing they failed to capture him, Liam flew into a rage. Facing the revenge of such a determined and ruthless man, he decided his only option was to return to his farm and hide out for a while. And right before leaving, Liam secretly met with his mistress. Little did he know, their every move was being watched by the lurking Kwon. Soon after, Liam received a warning message from Kwon. It threatened to release the photos online, ruining his reputation, unless he revealed the name of the person who killed his daughter. Liam panicked and frantically looked around, but Kwon was gone. Terrified, Liam couldn't stay any longer and rushed to the farm for safety. The subordinates back at the hotel analyzed that Kwon had prepared bombs, and that the bombs had enough power to destroy a truck. But even so, the subordinates reassured Liam that the farm was safe, completely unaware that Kwon was already driving there. After finding the farm where Liam was hiding, he first concealed the location of his car. Then, he used branches to cover his tracks. When night fell and the wind picked up, Kwon stealthily approached the edge of the farm. Taking advantage of the guards' inattention, he sneaked straight into the storage shed and quickly planted a bomb. By the time the guards realized something was wrong, Kwon swiftly took them down in a split second. At that moment, another guard heard the commotion and ran over. Kwon ambushed him from the darkness, overpowering him in a flash. After subduing the 2 guards, Kwon hid outside and started counting down. When the countdown reached 0, the entire storage shed erupted in a deafening explosion. The people inside the house panicked and ran out. Kwon, having achieved his goal, quietly left. Liam continued to underestimate Kwan's abilities. For his own safety, he sent for more men the next day. But a short time later, another car exploded, instantly killing the guards inside. The quick-thinking henchman realized this was a remote-controlled bomb. This meant that Kwan needed a wide view to detonate the bomb, implying he was lurking nearby. So, a group of henchmen quickly went to search the thick forest. Sure enough, Kwan was hiding there. However, in just a few seconds, he vanished into the forest again. Then, he deliberately released smoke to lure them closer. The men still didn't realize the surrounding area was full of traps. In the next second, one of them tripped over a wire and fell to the ground. Kwan, hiding below, immediately dragged him into his hiding place. The two ahead were still cautiously searching, completely unaware that their comrade was missing. Very soon, another man stepped on nails hidden in the ground that pierced through his foot. His comrade tried to help him, but triggered a mechanism. Seeing the time was right, Kwan decisively appeared and ran towards the two men. Unexpectedly, a bullet struck his shoulder. The shooter was the security team leader who was arriving. Seeing the situation was bad, Kwan quickly fled, disappearing back into the forest in just a few seconds. Learning from the earlier experiences of their comrades, the team leader didn't dare to act recklessly. Kwan, hiding behind a tree, narrowly escaped. The team leader returned to report and truly felt Kwan's strength. So, he advised Liam to send at least 100 more men to capture him, but this seemed like a huge exaggeration. At that moment, the sky began to drizzle, and Kwan hid in a treehouse, using a small fire to heat his dagger. When the dagger was red-hot, he prepared to sterilize his wound. The intense pain quickly caused him to lose consciousness. As he fell, Kwan couldn't help but remember the days he lived with his daughter. The burning desire for revenge pushed him to wake up again. Then, he came up with a completely new plan. That night, Liam finally clearly investigated Kwan's background as a Special Forces soldier. Looking back at Kwan's terrifying experiences as a young man, Liam's face became even more serious. But now, with 20 guards protecting him, he still decided to go to sleep. But then, something strange happened. His dog suddenly collapsed to the ground. No matter how much he called, it wouldn't wake up. Immediately, a bad feeling washed over him. He hurriedly reached for his gun, but the gun in the drawer had mysteriously disappeared. Liam understood that he was truly out of options this time. Sure enough, in the next second, Kwan slowly approached with the gun in his hand. Then, he revealed the bomb strapped to Liam's body. Liam was so terrified that he could only kneel and surrender. Under Kwan's threat, Liam revealed everything he knew. Turned out he really didn't know who the killer was. Furthermore, to keep his current position, he had been trying to find the person behind the attack. Seeing that Kwan stubbornly didn't believe him, Liam had to reveal his current plan. It turned out he had set a trap for the IRA organization. Now, all he needed was for them to carry out another bombing, and he would find out who the killer was. Kwan didn't say anything more, but only gave him one final day to find the killer. After saying those harsh words, he left. At this point, Liam was truly terrified by this Chinese ex-soldier. But to prevent Kwan from taking any crazy actions, he hired an outside expert to catch Kwan. The security team planned to send some people to help him, but the expert confidently refused. Then he drove off alone, preparing to capture Kwan alive. Meanwhile, another terrorist attack happened on the other side, and the police, finding clues from the two explosions, finally located the perpetrator. Upon receiving the news, Liam immediately used his resources to confirm the location of the terrorists' hideout. Then, Liam called the expert and told him that he must capture Kwan this time, no matter what. Not long after, the expert found Kwan's treehouse, but he wasn't there. As the expert moved forward, he triggered a mechanism. As he fell, Kwan immediately rushed in. After the two fought for what seemed like forever, Kwan finally gained the upper hand. That night, he obtained the information about the killer he had been seeking, so he finally spared the expert's life. The next day, the police actively cordoned off the criminal's residence. Snipers were in position, ready and waiting for the order to fire. However, just as they were about to take action, Kwan was one step ahead. At that moment, the doorbell of the criminal's house suddenly rang. Seeing this, the police quickly stopped their operation. Turned out that two civilians had arrived at the door. That's right, one of the two people was Kwan in disguise. Now, he was preparing to use the excuse of house repairs to get inside. Under the strong request of the homeowner, the criminals had to agree. Finally, Kwan saw the people who had murdered his daughter. Then, he calmly walked towards the kitchen, identifying the location of everyone in the process. At this point, the criminals, harboring malicious intentions, demanded to inspect Kwan's backpack. Kwan happily agreed. Very quickly, all the tools were dumped out. But as the thugs pulled up the black cloth, Kwan immediately struck. Then, he quickly grabbed a submachine gun and opened fire. After kicking one person away, the terrorists also grabbed their guns and began to fight back. At this point, the police, not understanding what was happening, decided to stand still. Very quickly, Kwan, hiding behind the table, started firing accurately, and 2 terrorists fell to the ground on the spot. Kwan then moved to a wall for cover. Unfortunately, his gun was shot out of his hands, forcing him to hide in the corner. Luckily, the terrorists came to reload and didn't hit Kwan. He jumped out and quickly subdued one of them. Then the 2 began fighting hand to hand. After defeating the terrorist on the ground, Kwan lifted the TV and smashed it down. At this moment, the final terrorist rushed forward with a knife, but how could he be a match for Kung Fu? Kwan smoothly executed a shoulder throw, taking him down to the ground. Then he tightened a rope around him, securing him. At this point, the police, seeing no further movement, prepared to take action. Special Forces soldiers then began to descend. Kwan, having successfully carried out his revenge, calmly left the scene. It was only then that the police realized that all the terrorists had been eliminated. Meanwhile, Kwan stepped into the elevator, just barely avoiding the incoming Special Forces soldiers. Later, the police learned from a woman that the thugs had been eliminated by a 60-year-old Chinese plumber. The police chief immediately thought of Kwan. At this point, he calmly returned to his Chinese restaurant. Soon after, the investigative team found traces of Kwan. However, the police chief chose to spare him, deciding to just have intelligence officers continue to monitor him. Because this time, Kwan had helped them a lot, and he also saw in Kwan the resilience of an old soldier. Finally, Kwan and Kui returned to the restaurant and embraced tightly. The movie ends here. Remember to subscribe to the channel, like, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest movies.